Welcome to the SIWIKE Podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE Podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here again with one of our guest hosts, Revant, and we thought we'd have a conversation on what students and folks do as a job after graduating. So, well, he comes to us from a management and a business background, so we'll focus in that area for now. But we'll talk a little bit about some of the typical areas like accounting, finance, economics, and then maybe some of the lesser known areas like consulting and investment banking, product management and things like that, and maybe explore a few other curiosities. So Revant, it seems like that you are curious about what others are interested in. So tell us a little bit about what was interesting to you and what you've been talking to your other classmates and colleagues about in terms of what they want to do after graduating.
It's always a confusing topic and also a sensitive one since, like not everyone is sure about what they want to do after they graduate.
Mm-hmm.
But, like something which you want to, the area of topic which you want to specialize in is quite crucial when you're heading into your last few years. And that's when people can tend to even get more confused as to like whether they're going to be liking the job, what the job prospect is going to look like, and what the job consists of, and whether they're actually passionate about that. So it's all a big blur for everyone, including me. So that's why I wanted you to take us to give your opinion in brief about a few topics such as what would a student in the field of finance or like accounting, marketing, HR, what would be an ideal job, what would a job look like, and what would it consist of, just to give everyone a good picture of what it actually is and what myths they are kind of believing in.
Sure. And I guess before we dive into each of those different areas, what I'd want folks to think about is a little bit on their mindset where, yes, when you graduate, you will need to get a job at some point in time. Well, unless you come from a wealthy family and you're taken care of, but most of us will have to land something. But one of the things that a lot of folks don't realize is that job choice is not permanent, right? It's not a tattoo that you can't get rid of. So if you decide to start in accounting and then move to finance and then go to HR and then do consulting and then go into data science and then investment banking or whatever, that would be a pretty cool career, right? That would be a lot of fun for someone to kind of jump around and do that. And that is possible, right? A lot of folks talk about, I guess, wasting their time or making the wrong decision and all that sort of stuff. And I get that, and I totally understand that perspective. But from my perspective, one of the things I'd want folks to think about is, well, if you spent that time and enjoyed the time, or even if you didn't enjoy it, then at least you learned something, right, about what you didn't like and the areas of business or work or whatever it is that you want to do something different in, and you can grow from that. So you're never making a mistake unless you do it again, is often what I tell people. The first time you do it, you just didn't have enough information. The second time you do it, well, then you made a mistake, right? So the first time, if you're learning, well, then don't do it again and don't put yourself in the same pile. So those are some of the things that I want folks to kind of think about even before they make a decision. So one, they're not locked in. You can always switch. And two, like don't take that decision so seriously because there's so many people who have a degree in something and then are doing a job in something totally different. Right? I take myself as a case in point where I'm computer science, right? That was my background. Then I ended up doing management consulting, moving more into business. And now I'm more in like education and psychology is probably where I would probably situate myself. What will I be doing in 5 or 10 years? I have no idea, right? Maybe I'll be an artist or a chef or a baker, who knows, right? But the world is filled with amazing things. And unless you go and explore, then it's more challenging. But if we kind of break out into the typical areas, I would imagine that a lot of your friends are the typical ones are accounting and finance, right? So what are some of the things that you know about accounting and finance, or you've heard from friends, and then I'll kind of fill that in with what I know and see if we can kind of bridge some of the gaps.
So the most cliche thing would be a person who's specializing in the field of accounting has to become a chartered accountant, which is something like filing income tax. But maybe most people don't know about the other jobs that a CA can do,
Mhm.
right? Whereas a person who's specializing in the field of finance, everyone just thinks that, okay, like this guy is going to work with stocks. It's
Mhm.
not always that, there are many other things, something like debt, derivatives, and many other things.
Mhm.
So that is a cliche version of what a student knows about, going ahead with these specializations.
Yeah. So from an accounting perspective, and I wasn't an accountant, even though I worked for one of the big four. So I'll share what I know, but it is a broad area on its own. And the interesting thing is when folks get into accounting, their automatic decision is, I need to get into the one of the big four, right? Because that's kind of the expectation. But if you think about which companies need or do accounting, it's all of them, right? Every single company needs accounting. So if you want to go into like the automotive industry or retail or manufacturing or tech or whatever, all of them need accountants in some shape or form, right? So to your point, a lot of them, the stereotypes are of doing taxes and stuff like that. There's the basic bookkeeping things that you have to kind of track all the records, the income and the expenses, balance sheet, income statements, and all that sort of stuff. And then you got to file your taxes to the CRA or your particular government wherever you live. And there's a lot of people who do that from a commercial perspective, from an individual perspective there. They do it private sector, public sector as well, because the private and public accounting are different. And then there are people who do audits, right? So they just make sure that other people are following the rules and they're doing what they're supposed to, right? And that's another area of accounting on its own. There's also an advisory component, a consulting component to say, well, how do you optimize any of these? Like, can you take advantage of certain taxes, uh, some schemas or something like that that will help you to optimize how you move your money or your depreciation and things like that, right? So the field of accounting is pretty vast, and with a knowledge of accounting, if you get kind of the CPA role, which is kind of the professional designation in Canada, then you can do a lot of things. So that kind of gives a bit of an overview where even though accounting on its own is a bit of a specialization, like you could specialize in that specialization, right? Even more so, right? And some people say, I just do expat tax, right? Where it's people that work abroad and they just do their personal income tax for that. Some people specialize in something as small as that, right? On the finance side, there's a whole bunch of areas, as you mentioned. Well, oftentimes it's dealing with some sort of stocks. It could be on the investment side, and you're part of like a hedge fund or a portfolio manager and stuff like that, and doing some equity research to figure out, okay, which companies are the best bets in the next little while, and how much to buy, when to buy, and all those things, and look at trends there. But finance is also for every company has sometimes they pair it together, accounting and finance, where you need to know, well, how much revenue am I making? Do I have enough money to build this new warehouse that I want to do, or how do I get that money? Because then you get into things like debt and well, the corporate equivalent to like a mortgage, right? Because they often don't buy the new building or the corporate campus. They have other people that help them with that. So those are some of the, I guess, classic areas of accounting and finance, and those are kind of the more mainstay, the more common ones that folks will get into when they go into a business or some sort of management or commerce degree. But then there's some of the other ones where things like economics, HR, marketing, and sales. What are some of the thoughts that you have in those areas, or what are you familiar with from the discussions with your classmates?
So for HR, it's something like recruitment process is the first word that comes up in most people's mind,
Mhm.
and something also like compliance and all those things. While for marketing, it would be like can be a graphic designer who's like promoting the brand, or like setting up ad campaigns
Mhm.
in order to appeal to the consumers, or coming up with new creative ideas. So those are my best views.
Yeah, so from an HR side, where you'll first encounter them is probably on the recruiting, right? You'll go through the campus process, you'll meet a recruiter, and hopefully you'll get hired and get an offer. And then they continue on with things like learning and development, right? So at some point, you need to learn how to do the job at that company, right? Because each company does things a little bit differently. They'll have things like onboarding and orientation and things like that. At some point, you'll be paid, right? So they'll have a salary and benefits, total compensation type group that'll help you kind of get paid. They'll have a payroll department that actually executes and puts the money in your bank account, that sort of thing. There'll be some sort of organizational design where like what's the department structure, who's your boss, and who does your boss report to, and the different levels and all that sort of stuff, right? There's also different sort of like employee wellness type of things where some of it might be under learning, some of it might be benefits and things like that. And depending on the type of company, if you work in one where there's like um, a what's that? Oh, I'm blanking out. It's one where all the groups get together and shoot.
It's
No, it's a lot of private sector has it. Public sector. So teachers are part of unions. Oh my gosh, it's a union. Yeah, so you might have to go into like negotiations to deal with unions and stuff like that, and different sort of contract and labor laws. So yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different things that happen from an HR perspective, and yeah, it's one of those things where anything that relates to people are what HR does, and there's upcoming ones like people analytics, right? To say, well, employee wellness and stuff. What is the correlation between the certain interview questions that they had at the beginning? How does that affect someone's performance, and can I find the appropriate questions to ask or the things to look at in order to find like the top candidates later on, right? On the marketing and sales side, then yeah, you have things like the branding. You'll have the creative side of it where they're creating the campaigns where like a lot of the famous marketers like McDonald's or Coca-Cola or Nike have their like just do it ads and everybody kind of knows those types of things. They'll have different kind of activations where they might have an event, they might sponsor, you might see them on a sports team or at a venue. They might have their name on an arena or a public space or something, so that every time they reference it, then it's the name of the company and then the arena. And that's all part of marketing, because they need to get you in their names in your head, right? There's social media, digital marketing, right? So everything on the different platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and whatever, right? Someone has to create the posts, the videos, everything that's there. Then there's the analytics behind it too, right? To say, okay, which ones are working, right? Is the Facebook ad working better than the billboard that we put up? Which is it more effective than having our name on the top of the building or whatever it is, right? So those are a whole bunch of things on the marketing, and then ultimately the goal would be to turn that into a sale, right? So that person who sees all this stuff that you paid a lot of money for, like the Super Bowl ad or the whatever it is, then they eventually buy your product, whatever it is. Now it's harder to correlate marketing to sales, but there are ways to do that, and it's coming up with how do we make sure that we're using our money appropriately there. So yeah, those would be the different areas that I've seen. So there's kind of that creative proportion, there's all that digital stuff there, there's the actually in-events activation, and a lot of the data side there. And I'm sure there's a couple of others that are more nuanced, but those are kind of the basics that are there. And have folks, or are they still interested on the economic side, or do they lump them in with other areas?
I really haven't come across many students who are specializing only in economics, but I think most of the people in management right now are specializing in something in a management related field and not economics. But yeah, even economics is definitely a topic to, talk about, because who knows, like there would be students who would be super interested in this. So like my perspective, a student's perspective on studying economics would be something like uh, working with statistics to govern and predict the inflation and they control like their prediction on monetary policy, fiscal policy, like macroeconomics factors, and all those components to predict the future of what a country can do and what a company can do.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, most of folks that do economics end up in some place of research, either in an institution like a school or in a government entity with either the city level, provincial, state level, or the federal level. And oftentimes it'll be to help institute some sort of policy. They can also exist in a company because larger companies have that at a different scale, right? Not at a city scale, but on a company-wide scale. And some companies are big enough where they could be a whole city on themselves if you're to separate it out. But there are definitely those types of things. And then we really got into this conversation based on some of the more kind of lesser known areas, but seem to be a little bit more up and coming, where there are things like consulting, where more and more people are interested in that, and that's starting to become more of a stable or area of interest. Things like investment banking, I think that was always there, but again, maybe it's a smaller area. Things like data science and product management as well. Those are two that from a business side that a lot of folks are now coming to me. What are your thoughts and perspectives on any of those four? And are there other ones that folks are kind of talking about in your circles?
Yeah, definitely. Those are the most upcoming ones, and everyone's curious to learn about that. Let's say for data science, it could be working with numbers, analytics, and analyzing the profitability of a company and how you can maximize it. So, is that kind of related to consulting? What are your thoughts?
Well, I would say that data science is actually one of those things that can be in every single area, right? So you can have people analytics is data science applied to HR, right? You can have marketing analytics, which is data science applied to marketing, right? And then you have kind of all the financial analytics, which is data science pronounced applied to that. Consulting is a little bit different in the sense that, again, it takes any of those areas and just helps companies do it a little bit better. That's kind of my simple definition of what a consultant does is it helps a company do something better, right? And usually it's in one of three areas. It's based on their business processes, right? So what they're actually doing. The second one would be based on their the people, right? How are the people that are actually doing it? How are they doing, right? So that's pseudo kind of HR and improving it. And then the third one is kind of technology or their products and things like that, where how do you run a little bit more efficiently in any shape or form, right? So you could apply any of that. So most of the functions in a company would be kind of business as usual. How do you keep the lights running? How do you make sure products are shipped or services are delivered and all that sort of stuff? What consulting often does is say, okay, how do we make it better? Right. So the supply chain and distribution is working and is fine, but could we make it better? Could we increase the efficiency, make it cheaper, more cost effective? Could we innovate so that we're not put out of business later on as well? So consulting will do any and or all of that as well. And there'll be all sorts of different sort of consulting where you can have like on the accounting side, like financial advisory consulting, right? So tax consulting, right? You can have anything like that. You can have consulting on investments, like where should the company do it? Because if the company is not big enough to have a department on its own to do it, then instead of hiring someone and getting to know the business or a whole team, then you can hire a consultant, consulting company, and they would help you do that. So, I mean, consulting in general will run the gamut of anything where usually you have some sort of strategy where you come up to the company, you talk to the CEO, the CXO, whatever level that you're at there, and say like, what do we need to do? What do we want to do, right? And they strategize in terms of like, okay, do we want to improve the process? Do we want to go into a totally separate different business, into a new geography, into new something? So it's figuring out what to do, and then at some point you will actually want to implement it, right? So you don't want just this great strategy that you don't actually do. Then you want to actually implement it. So when you implement, you have to say, okay, what exactly do we do, right? Do we need a bigger team, a bigger warehouse, a bigger this and that? So you need all the requirements for all that sort of stuff, and you need to provision them, request them, get money for them, actually train people and all that sort of stuff, and then design that whole process. And at some point, you'll need to implement it, right? Whether it's a technical system, whether it's a business process, whatever it is. And then at some point, you'll need to turn it on and go live, right? So that it can actually work. And then there's the ongoing sustainment afterwards, which usually you hand that over to the company so that they can run it as business as usual. So those are kind of the basic areas of consulting where you can focus on any one of those niches, right? So you might be focused only on developing the strategy. And when you do that, that's a lot of Excel, that's a lot of PowerPoint, and some Microsoft Word in there to do it. When you're actually in the implementation side, that's a lot of like Microsoft Project, right, or whatever project management tool. Probably some Excel, whatever technology you're implementing, be it like an actual tech platform or like a business process tech or new product tech or new service tech, and then a lot of training and stuff like that happens there. Um, yeah, so it runs the gamut. And in my career, I've done all of it, but I focus more on the implementation side, right? So I've done a little bit of the strategy part, but not so much. There are some people that do exclusively strategy, right? And even from the firm's perspective, like people talk about like the big three, right? The McKinsey, Bain, BCG. Those are more pure strategy, right? They don't actually implement a lot, right? But now people realize that you can create the best plan, but unless you know how to do it, it's not as valuable. So now those companies are really organizing and making sure that all of the different plans and strategies actually get executed. Then you have things like the big four, which I mean, they're big four from accounting, but they also each of them have big consulting practices that help. Sometimes there's big five or big six or big seven, depending on who wants to be lumped in with there. And there's all sorts of other different consulting. So consulting is a big one on its own. What about things well, so if we talk a little bit about data science specifically, then there's part of it again in those areas where you'll have things like the visualization, which is how do I interpret the data, right? And that's usually where consulting or at kind of executive levels of processes will take a look at it, because they want to say, does this can I give meaning to this data? Then you'll actually have the true data scientists, which create algorithms. They normalize and strip the data, they gather it and make sure there's appropriate correlation, or they can find causation, that sort of thing, and run their different algorithms to do that. But then that visualization side makes it so that it's better in a business context. So that's kind of the consulting and data science part. But you also mentioned an interest from a bunch of folks in investment banking. So what are some of the areas that you've heard of in that area?
So just before we head on to investment banking, I'd like to just mention that most people like of my age don't know what exactly data science is. Like until I had a conversation with you today, even I wasn't aware that people's analytics was a thing. Like it's all new to me. So those are some good aspects which should be highlighted upon at our universities. And moving on to like the finance industry, like obviously there are many different topics, many different career prospects, such as you could be an investment banker, you could be a M&A specialist, you could be an equity research analyst, and so many more, like a debt fund manager, portfolio manager. So all these things are definitely highlighted, at least as to what I know from my friends, that many people are aware about the finance industry at my university. But I feel like there needs to be a more emphasis and highlight on the upcoming job prospects, such as consulting and data science.
Mhm.
That would be my take.
For sure. And I think at the end of the day, like the universe can provide all these resources, but it's really up to the student to explore those resources and find out like what's appropriate for them. But I mean, there is not like kind of specific investment banking course, right? Well, at least not that I know of. Maybe there would be coming up, mainly because the world changes so fast that by the time they probably put one in, the things will probably shift. So consulting is one where I've actually seen a lot more consulting type courses that are created, but not as like a whole program, but more of like one or two courses here and there. So in the investment banking side, like you mentioned, things that are pretty prominent, things like M&A, right? All the research that needs to be done, a lot of the due diligence that needs to happen, because if a company wants to expand, a company wants to go into a new area, how does that happen, right? You hear about the startups getting whatever a $1 billion investment in whatever. Well, it's usually the investment banks that help that happen, right? The ones that IPO, right, and go into the stock market, right? Those are the investment banks that help, because it might not be a traditional bank, because a lot of the traditional banks are focused on things like checking accounts and mortgages and stuff like that. But most of the big banks have an investment banking arm of it, and they will focus on stuff like that. And then they'll be very interrelated into finance and things like capital markets and stuff, because in order for them to have access to funds or whatever, then they need to understand that area, right? So and some people correlate that very closely with consulting, because there are certain functions of consulting that overlap with investment banking. Now, it's an argument between the investment bankers and the consultants on who works harder, that sort of thing. But they both work hard in some shape or form, right? So there's definitely discussions on that side. And I'm not sure if you're hearing it, but the one area that I'm hearing more folks talk about is product management, right? So this is kind of the overlap with tech, where they have a tool set, a platform, or whatever, and someone has to understand like the business reasons on why would I create a new function or feature in this area, and how do I prioritize this over that? Because you have a development team, but it's only so big, right? So when Instagram way back when was the dominant kind of social platform, and then Snapchat came in. Someone had to say, "Oh, Snapchat has this new feature, right? And then we'll develop stories in ours." And they had to probably prioritize that versus some other features that they were going to put in as well. So, are you hearing other folks talk about product management, or are there other areas that folks are interested in as well?
Not yet, to be honest. Really not heard about that. This is the first time I'm hearing about the product management. But I think so. There is definitely some advancement in the fintech kind of industry.
Mhm.
Like when people are starting to like apply their technical knowledge in the field of finance to create algorithms, and also this isn't really a career prospect, but I've been hearing a lot of people who are doing a lot of trading in crypto and derivatives
Mhm.
separately, not together. Also together might be, but I think many people are getting influenced by like YouTubers who give tips on when to invest in crypto and all those things.
Mhm.
So I've heard a couple of my friends who are planning on just doing freelancing after they graduate and just doing crypto trading full time. What are your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that to me is like saying I'm going to be a full-time gambler, right? I'm just going to live in the casino and do that, right? Right now, I think that's where kind of crypto is. Derivatives are a little bit different, right? So if we talk about crypto, first of all, it is kind of the Wild West out there, where there's no dominant currency. I guess Bitcoin is kind of the leader. But there's a whole bunch of them that are like clipping at its heels in terms of coming up the next one, whichever one you think it might be. But some form of crypto will be around, but which standard, I'm not sure, right? It's one of those things where it's that competitive market there. So the thing is, for people that are going there, when you make a lot of money, then that means someone probably lost some money, right? Because you trade and someone trades. Like there's always someone who lose it out a little bit. Now you can say, well, it's the mining and the machining and things like that, where someone just loses kind of their electricity bill or whatever in that, and not necessarily money. But I mean, they paid for the electricity, unless they're stealing from the grid or whatever, and doing it illegally. But just be aware of what you're really doing, right? Because nobody really knows or understands crypto, but it's not that much different than the stock market, right? It's kind of like an informed investment, right? So I kind of joke when I say it's kind of like gambling, where gambling is much worse because the odds are always against you. Whereas with the right information and with the right kind of skills, and oftentimes with the right patience, then you can actually make money on crypto or on stock trading, day trading, and all that sort of stuff. But without kind of that patience, without that knowledge, then you can lose a lot. So what I would say for those is to make sure you cap your downside, right? So don't leverage, don't take out an extra mortgage and bet that on black sort of thing, right? Or bet it on Bitcoin and all that. Make sure that this is extra money that you don't really need. That if it went to zero, you're okay, right? It might be a little painful, but you'll be okay. If you're using your rent money or your future retirement fund to do it, maybe not. But this is one where you could use. right? On the derivatives, right, that's for people who feel that they have a good sense of where the market is going, where things are happening, and not that they can predict the future, but they have a good sense based on past performance or whatever where things are going. So it's a little bit different than kind of basic stock trading, in that there are things like futures and stuff like that you want to take a look at, and there's so much complexity to it. I don't even know half, if not 80% of what's out there. So you'll have to figure that out and talk to someone who's much smarter than me about that side. But again, it's one where chances are someone has set it up so that they're making money, right? Which probably means that you're not, right? So unless you're the one who's the smart person creating this stuff, then just be careful, because chances are someone else is creating it so that they can take your money, right? So just being aware. Now, if you get smart enough and you gain a lot of experience, you're probably going to lose a whole bunch of money in the process. But if you feel that you can win, then there's definitely an opportunity there. So that's kind of my 2 cents. Just buyer beware, and if you're going to play with stuff that you can afford to lose, right? Are there other areas that folks have been chatting with you about, or that you've been discussing with folks in terms of career prospects or areas of interest?
I think those were the two main things what I've been hearing recently. So I think we've got everything covered.
Sounds good. So hopefully we've given folks a bit of an overview on kind of the business world. So whether you have a BBA, a BCom, a BFin, a B something management business related, these are all kind of the typical things that you would want. So we talked a little bit about accounting and finance, and HR, marketing, economics, and stuff like that. And some of the up and coming ones like the consultings and the product management, and even crypto a little bit. But what I encourage you to explore is getting experience, right? Doing whatever it is that you want to be doing, talking to people who are doing the things that you want to be doing, so that you can at least hear from them, instead of just making assumptions based on what you watch on TV or what you heard glamorized in the news, that sort of thing. Actually live from experience, and that would help. And the great thing is, whatever you start with, from a degree perspective, from a first job perspective, you can always change, right? I know a lot of people who hop around in these various industries, where a lot of consultants will pick up data science and do that, and then because of their experience with data, then that makes them better investment bankers, and because of viewing different companies, they become product managers, and so many other different ways. So don't be limited in any one area, and hopefully you're curious and can explore more. So anything else that you want to leave folks off with from an audience perspective, Revant?
Just say, because of this episode, I think, at least for me, and I hope many other people, got a broader perspective upon different areas as to what they can expect, what the job could look like. So thank you so much for that, Luki.
And keep in mind, I'm no expert in any of these areas. The only one where I can have a little bit is consulting, where I've done some work there. But go find someone, and maybe we have another guest host that is in one of those areas that you can reach out to. Or LinkedIn is a great treasure trove of resources for you to connect with, alumni as well from your school, and there's so many other ways to connect with folks. So thanks everyone, and thanks Revant for joining us, and hopefully we'll have you back for another episode.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.